So the recipe I'm running is I'm doing 2-pour system with 2 120-gram pours.
And you're keeping it open for that first pour.
Right.
Yep.
I'm not trapping the bloom.
Welcome to another episode of Kind of Home Coffee Brewing with April / a little bit of April Brewers Cup. We're gonna do it a bit different from what we're used to. I'm in Seoul, in Korea, out of all the places, and I'm Christian with me here. Mainly because you were just in Hong Kong and won the April Brewers Cup. Yeah?
Yeah.
How was that for you?
It was quite an experience to travel all the way to Hong Kong.
Yep.
It was my first time there.
Uh-huh.
But luckily, I already knew some people that I met at World of Coffee in Busan.
Yep.
And so it was really quite nice and quite familiar, even though first time.
And you've been out traveling like quite a lot. We actually met each other in a few countries before that. Copenhagen, before you moved over to Asia, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm actually Korean American and born in the States and worked in the States in the Bay Area. And then I moved over to Copenhagen. I've also lived in Paris, and now I'm currently in Seoul. Yeah.
Yeah, so like a little bit all over the place, which is really cool. And we'll get back to that a little bit more later. We're also going to talk a little bit about like where we're standing, because for those of you with a keen eye, you see that we're not in someone's home, we're not in the April studio, that means we're somewhere else, right? But we'll get back to that later. For now, for those of you that don't know anything about the April Brewers Cup, it's basically a coffee competition that I built around the brewers that we produce here at April, right? So we have the April Brewer, and this competition kind of travels the world and tries to find who is the best in each country to use the brewer, actually. So it's relatively simple. Competitors are allowed to travel from different countries, hence Christian was allowed to actually compete in Hong Kong. And it's been quite a few times where we had winners from other countries, which is actually kind of cool. So we really appreciate it. And what we want to do here in the video is then talk about and share the recipe that you are using pretty much, right? So I'm just going to let you brew some coffee and then ask some questions kind of down the road. And then you're more than welcome to like share whatever you think is important about your own coffee brewing.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Go for it.
Basically, I mean, April Brewers are something that I have kind of learned brewing on. I think kind of in Copenhagen is when I kind of really got dialed in with April Brewers and started to hand brew, because in the US, it's actually very uncommon for us to do a lot of hand brewing. There just isn't as much of that culture, as it's like a very high espresso culture and a lot of higher volume. So it's kind of harder to have really intimate brew bars. So I think Copenhagen was a lot of more my introduction into that in a shop setting. And then now being here in Korea, it's a huge part, as I mean, this bar itself is built for brewing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of really dove into it and got really into it. But always from kind of the April Brewer context from beginning, as well as bringing it over into Korea and into the shop. I think that style of coffee, especially like Nordic style roasts, are something that I really resonate with in general. So it's kind of just a natural progression into it.
Yeah, awesome. And so most of you know by now that we have a few different April brewers. We're standing here with, let's say, the very kind of first test batch of the April Hybrid Brewer, which is soon to be released again, second generation. A few changes, a few modifications. Made the design even more April, which is really cool. But tell us a little bit, why did you choose this over the other April brewers you could have chosen?
So we were given 250 grams, I believe, beforehand, before the competition. A different roast, but it was the same bean. And kind of I went into dialing those beans in with a couple of different approaches. I had the regular April Brewer as well as the hybrid. And I had a couple recipes for all of them that I wanted to test. However, testing these beans were really interesting, where we didn't know anything about them, but it was most likely an Ethiopian, just from the way the beans looked.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And also, it was definitely not fully washed, just based on the color of the outside. And after grinding it, it's much, much lighter. You could tell that there was processing on the outside. I wasn't quite sure if it was like a honey process, as we found out later.
Yeah.
It could have been a natural, but when pushing this coffee through more agitation or more pours or trying to extract more out of it, there was this astringency and bitterness that came out, as well as there was this really nice sweet spot. And I found that using the 2-pour recipe with the hybrid was a really good match.
Yeah.
And I think also the hybrid has a lot of room for error, as in it just has a bigger sweet spot in comparison to doing an aggressive 4-pour percolation. And yeah, so I think it just tasted the best. And I think everything is always in the cup.
Sure. Oh, definitely. Especially when you compete, right? Like that's really the key thing in everything you do, right? So yeah, walk us through a little bit. I mean, maybe you're just grinding some coffee now. What kind of grinder are we using in the first place?
Yeah, so actually I was also wanting to decide between 2 grinders. I really like the grinders that ZP Presso has.
Yeah.
And the K Ultra just fit the coffee.
So that's what you used in the competition
Correct.
as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I use this for the competition.
Yeah.
The ZP6 I really enjoy as it is a higher clarity burr.
Okay.
Where when you use multiple pours, I think it definitely has a different expression for sure.
Yeah.
But with the coffee that we had, the K Ultra just really was forgiving, as well as it gave nice body and texture to it.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it had a really nice sweet spot.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like so the way it works in the competition, as you said, that you get that kind of 250 grams of practice coffee before, and then you get a very different batch, but same coffee roasted later, right? And I mean, it's quite difficult to brew a coffee you don't know, right? Granted, you guessed the origin correctly, which not everyone did, but it definitely changes a few things on the kind of brewing parameters, right?
Yeah, it definitely did.
So pre-rinsing the filters, always a thing for you?
Yeah, I think with the April filters, I always pre-rinse.
We're doing 2 brews here, which is a little bit unusual, but then that means I can help with it. One thing we haven't said, what is the grind size on?
On the for the K Ultra that I have, it's a 7.5.
Yep.
Is where, and actually I'm doing exactly how I did the competition coffee as well.
Awesome.
Coffees I picked out also. We're running April Elita Natural.
Cool.
So another natural processed coffee. And then we're actually running a roastery from Korea, also called Claramento.
Claramento. We just visited their coffee shop like 30 minutes ago.
Yep.
Good coffee shop.
And we're running the Panama Totomas Rio. It's a geisha, and it's also a natural process, but it's cold fermentation.
Cold fermentation, natural process.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So it'll be interesting to see how they're different.
Yeah, I think I mean, these days when it comes to Panama and geisha, there's just so many new farm names popping up, I think. Which on one side, it's the established farms that just have the land and change the name because it's easier to sell. And on the other side, there's actually new farms coming in, right? So it's kind of an interesting time. Elita is obviously also an interesting farm to benchmark with these days. Given that they just won Best of Panama, right? Cool. Are you doing any differences in brewing on these 2 coffees, or are you treating them pretty much the same?
I think I'm treating them the exact same.
Yeah.
And I'm running exactly how I ran competition-wise.
Yep.
Generally, I prefer to brew with 12 to 13 grams.
Yep.
But for competition, when you're being compared to other cups directly, especially in the first 2 rounds in April Cup, I definitely think I made the decision to updose to 15 grams so that there was intensity enough, so that when compared to other cups, it could still stand out.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I've heard that like a few times. And I mean, granted, you made it to the final, right? And you won, so there's some truth to that. But I've also found I've had like a similar argument from other competitors where they want to brew more intensely to then stand out more, and then I often argue that it's jeopardizing the flavor quality a little bit, so that it actually would be better to have a bit less coffee. But again, you did win, so there's an authority on this, right? So let's try it.
Okay, so I think we can.
I'm gonna not be in the way.
We can proceed to brew. Yeah. So the recipe I'm running is I'm doing 2-pour system with 2 120-gram pours.
Mm-hmm. And you're keeping it open for that first pour.
Right.
Yep.
I'm not trapping the bloom.
And what would be the main reason for that?
The main reason for that is that I personally feel that when you trap the second bloom, it still creates a cup structure that is similar to percolation that I personally really enjoy.
Yep.
But really, it was just the specific coffee for competition. It was better to trap the second
Fair enough.
pour.
Yeah.
I also tried trapping the bloom, and I just found it to just not be as delicious as trapping the second pour.
Fair enough. And I've had very kind of similar experiences with that as well. I think you need agitation to make tasty, especially when you work with the slightly lighter roasted coffee. I think agitation, especially in that first pour, really kind of helps the flavor quality come out. Cool, so 240. So you've basically done all the pouring before 1 minute. Now you just let it sit.
Yeah, and for me personally, I find that going a little bit finer and having less of an immersion when I'm faced with the choice of how to dial it, for me, it leads to cups that I enjoy more.
Okay. Have you played around a lot with how long you let it sit now?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of timings that I really enjoy. There's a fast immersion where I pour the second pour at 35 seconds. And then I trap it only until 115. So it's quite a fast immersion. And then the second timing, which I used for April Cup, is pouring at either 40 seconds or 45 seconds, and then trapping it for a full minute before releasing. I think generally I still try to hit certain target times. It's really coffee specific, but with the April Plastic Brewer, I tend to enjoy around 245. And then I find with the hybrid, 15 seconds more is usually where I tend to enjoy it. So usually around 3 minutes.
One thing we haven't discussed yet, what is the water that we're using here?
The water I'm using is third wave water.
Third wave,
but it's half dosage of third wave. And third wave it's composed of magnesium sulfate, calcium citrate, and sodium chloride. I don't find it to work with all coffees. I think sometimes the citrate in it can make coffees pop a little bit too much. So certain roasts and especially with some Nordic roasts, I don't think it's the best match. But I find it works well with a lot of coffees. And it's quite stable as well.
How did you, because when you compete in the April competition, then we're basically running like first rounds with competition water, and then final we kind of open up and people can use whatever water they want to use. How did you kind of play on that in the competition, and did that make a difference for you?
Yeah, I think it made a huge difference. I believe the competition water we had was a 40 ppm water, but the distribution of those minerals, we weren't sure what it was. But it had quite a fast finish, and the drop off was quite aggressive. So I dialed it to be a bit more intense than I would with third wave water, because to factor in the fact that it does drop off so aggressively, that water we had.
Awesome. So basically just about 3 minutes, we're ready. Both of them seems to be very kind of uniform, right? Go for it. Do we have any? Oh, yep, that's different. No flavor notes. What are we expecting from these two? The Alita you worked with before. So you have an idea.
The Alita Natural from April, it's definitely tastes like a Panama Geisha. It definitely has a lot of tropical notes. I found, especially with your guys' coffee, that resting it past 4 to 5 weeks, especially because we don't pre-grind here, definitely allows it to open up a lot more. For this left one, this is my first time brewing it, actually. So we're gonna find out together what it tastes like.
It's intense. Let's put it like that. Also very like geisha-esque for sure. Like citrusy, definitely a bit tropical. Let's try it. No? So we've been drinking a lot of geisha today in general, because we had some geisha over at their shop before as well, right?
Let's start with Alita.
Do you have a target TDS when you brew?
I think I always check TDS, and I think it tends to be around 1.3, but I think it's really coffee specific.
Yeah.
Some coffees taste better a little higher TDS, some a little bit lower. I personally have a bad habit of liking a little bit lower TDS, like 1.2.
Is that a bad habit? How come?
Or I guess I think it's a preference, a personal preference.
Yeah.
I think I really value and love clear flavor separation and clarity. And I find at a little bit lower TDS, you can taste those a bit better. However, sometimes texture can be lacking down there.
I mean, I think that's a debate, and I think you see that it's very different culturally depending on where you go. I also, like in Hong Kong, I was surprised over how average low the TDS was actually. Like it came out really, really low in general. And then in competition, it's something that's often very discussed as well, right? Whether or not you should be aiming for certain TDSs when you actually serve the judges. But I think in general, the body and the texture and the strength of the brew, it's all about making it fit into the coffee, like the flavor profile of the coffee and the different taste attributes. So let's say when I'm competing, I would worry a lot less about general strength. And I would go, what is the strength or body structure that fits with the other attributes of the coffee?
Right, and I think I approach that as well. I think the main thing that I focus on is balance always.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting living in so many countries recently. It's really interesting to see how people approach coffee and a little bit stylistically.
Yeah.
I found myself leaning to a lot more flavor separation and clarity while living in Copenhagen, while Korea has a high emphasis on texture and intensity.
Yeah.
And it's quite challenging. And I find that kind of sitting in the middle and learning how to shift your styles for customers is really a skill, but then also trying to win them over to something that you like as well.
Yeah, sure. It's a balance, right? This is quite tasty though. I quite enjoy this. Not just because it's my own coffee, but I mean, it is very, I mean, it's not my coffee, it's Wilton's coffee. We just roasted it, right? But it becomes very kind of tropical. It's very floral, which is really nice. Texture is good. A little bit kind of gummy berry-ish, but in like the best kind of way.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed actually with the 2-pour recipe, Trapping the Second, with the hybrid, is that a lot of times it makes coffees have this gummy quality to them and gummy candy quality. I notice it in a lot of coffees that I brew with it.
What do we think about this?
I'm taking my first sip. It's definitely more intense.
It is more intense, no doubt.
It also tastes like a Panama Geisha still.
Also tastes, yeah, no, for sure. You have a lot of the kind of citrusy, you have a lot of the florality in it as well. I think they're showcasing quite different in two quite different ways. Even that it was to say the same brewing approach, right?
Right. I think this one I would just go a little bit coarser.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Or I would try a different timing, which is what I really enjoy about the hybrid is you have different variables to play with, which can be a bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
But brewing with it, I'm really lucky here. The cafe we're at is called Dorenat.
Yeah.
And I'm really lucky that we're able to have a lot of flexibility of how we want to approach brewing. I do the QC here, and being able to use different brewers and different brewing approaches, it definitely prepped me for April Cup and competition.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of shops, you don't get that kind of flexibility.
He ran away now. I was just about to say we should bring, like, this would be the perfect timing to put in Ryan, that is the owner of the shop, but then he just took like a phone call and ran out. So
it happens.
We're not going to take Ryan in. He will come in later. No, it would be interesting because then we can discuss a little bit of the, let's say the, specialty coffee in Seoul, right? Because there's a bit of a different character, right?
Yeah.
I think in general, especially, and you've been traveling so much, I've been here a lot as well, right? And I think we do taste quite a lot of difference, especially because the kind of manual pour over filter culture is just not a thing yet, right?
Yeah, I think
it's coming, but it's not here yet.
Yeah, I think Seoul struggles a little bit in the sense of it is quite oversaturated with cafes, first of all.
Yeah.
So there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
And then there is quite a cafe culture in Seoul, but coffee culture isn't as important as cafe culture, or it just kind of sits a little bit differently. It's not a good or a bad thing, but I find that every country, when it comes to specialty coffee, has its problems and its really good parts.
Sure.
And working around those can always be a challenge, but it's always quite fun as well.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think I always say that you go to Seoul to experience maybe the stylistic approach. They're very like aesthetically, rooted in what they do. Like it looks really pretty, right? But then they don't always have that taste experience to kind of back that up in the same way. Whereas you have a lot of shops in Europe where maybe the coffee tastes better, but the coffee shops doesn't look so nice, right? It's kind of
US suffers from that.
It's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
It's a balance there that I think sometimes is very difficult. Difficult, but interesting, right?
Yeah, I think I always find no matter what city I live in or culture I'm in, there are always passionate people though.
Yeah.
And there's always people who are pushing against the flow in a lot of ways, or trying to push whatever that means in the right direction. And they're always trying to stay true to their values.
Yeah.
And I think those people are quite fascinating always. And I think a lot of people have influenced how I brew and how I approach coffee. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, which is also something you use in your presentation, right? Which I also personally really kind of enjoyed. It was more of how different cultures have kind of shaped your own kind of coffee journey, right? And I think that it made a lot of sense. And I think there's a lot of value in being able to travel around, right?
Yeah. There is a lot of value. It's also quite exhausting.
It is quite. I know that it's a thing. Anyhow, so what's next for you, right? So you just won the April Brewers Cup. You moved to Korea. You want to compete again?
Yeah. So I think I wasn't considering it as much beforehand because living in Korea, it is quite difficult for me to compete in my nationality, which would be the US.
Yeah.
Actually, because you have to have 2 years of residence in a country before you can compete in that country.
Yeah.
So it is quite a sacrifice and to go all the way to the US to compete. But I think after doing April Cup, and I think the momentum is there as well as the support is there along all fronts, including from you guys. And so my next plan is to compete in US Brewers Cup.
That's exciting, no?
That's exciting.
That's coming up very soon as well. So
very soon.
I'm personally looking forward to see what will happen there, right? And one of the things with the April Brewers Cup is that the people that do win, first of all, the concept is designed to just, let's say, inspire, a little bit educate, but also actually give proper feedback to people that wants to compete. So, we tell them, okay, you can't do this, or maybe you should do this, right? Which the normal kind of competition format doesn't really allow for. But secondly, if you win, you also get our support, right? For those that want it, in whatever shape or form they need it, right? So I'm looking forward to kind of follow the journey and see what comes out of it. I keep on waiting for Ryan to come in, but he keeps on talking on the phone, so we're just going to skip Ryan. And then I'm sure in the future he will be in this video for some capacity. Maybe do like a quick pitch about where like the coffee shop we're in. You mentioned it before, but let's pitch it. Yeah.
I'm working at a place called Dorenat, as you guys can see right here. It's in Mangwon area, and I think it's really interesting because we're importing a lot of different coffees, including April.
True.
And I think there is we really try to pay attention to quality of brews as well as customer service. And yeah, it's just, for me, it's a really great place to grow and express things that I've learned. I think the owner, Ryan, that is on the phone outside, he's given me a lot of freedom to do things the way that I really believe in. And even if there is a little bit of a disconnect with customers at times, we try to find ways to meet them halfway, as well as like introduce them. And I think how you communicate things in coffee is really important.
Yeah.
I think there are many ways to go about customer service, but I think meeting halfway the customer is really important. Not only encouraging them, but also taking their feedback. I think finding that middle ground is where a lot of people get introduced into specialty coffee, even in cultures or cities that don't have as strong of an influence.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I know Ryan since before he started this place, pretty much when we were kind of about to start April here in Seoul also. So it's definitely a shop that if you're in Seoul and you're doing coffee, you should come by and visit for sure. I'm sure you'll be here in some capacity and brew some coffee for them as well, right? Cool. I think it's a good place to wrap up. Unless, do you feel you have anything else you want to add before we?
Maybe just about April Cup. I think one thing that people don't see enough is, especially the judge panel that you guys had in Hong Kong. I think it was such a privilege to have world Brewer Cup.
It was a
and
pretty
Barista
strong
Cup.
judging panel, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the feedback to be able to get that is something that you just won't find anywhere.
Yeah.
You really won't. So I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the judge panel.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, they were also like shout out to them. They were pretty epic, right? There were two, well, at least one World Brewers Cup judge, one Barista Championship, like World Barista Championship judge, and other people that have been judging nationally for a long time, right? So, and that's part of what we're trying to do with the concept. We want to have local judges that have experience internationally because they can help you more, right? And it's all about trying to kind of, make sure that you have that skill level for your actual national competition, right? Because have you been competing in the National Brewers Cup before?
No, this is not at all. Yeah.
Exactly. So then this is like the first kind of step. You learn a few things, what you should do and you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And then you're able to kind of move on and do that competition, right? We're looking forward to see what comes next in your competition journey. Come to Seoul and drink coffee if you haven't already. It's a pretty cool place to be. As always, we want to thank you for watching. Come with comments. I'm sure if you come with a bunch of questions for Christian, I'm sure he will go in on YouTube and answer, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll do it.
We can set it up. So, feel free to just go for it. Sign up for Patreon as per always if you want to know where I kind of go next. And if you like this kind of format where we're more kind of in a coffee shop doing stuff, then let us know. Maybe we keep on doing some of those kind of videos as well. Let's see, who knows. Anyway, we want to thank you for being a part of it in the first place and competing in the April Brewers Cup. And then thank you guys for watching as well.
Thank you so much.
We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.